My sister hated her daughter. Despite always wanting to be a mother, and when I found out why I destroyed both of our families, my sister Brenna always said she'd be the perfect mother. Growing up, she collected baby dolls, planned elaborate tea parties, and volunteered at the church nursery every Sunday. When she finally got pregnant at 28, she cried happy tears and immediately started buying tiny clothes. But something changed the moment Zara was born. I was in the delivery room when it happened. The nurse placed this perfect pink baby on Brenna's chest, and instead of the joy I expected, my sister's face went completely blank. Not tired, blank, like someone had switched off a light behind her eyes. The nurses chalked it up to exhaustion and hormones. Her husband Danny assumed it was postpartum depression, but I knew my sister. This wasn't sadness or overwhelm. This was something else entirely. Over the next few months, I watched Brenna go through the motions of motherhood like an actress playing a role she despised. She'd feed Zara with mechanical precision, change diapers with surgical detachment, and rock her to sleep while staring at nothing. When Zara cried, Brenna would flinch like the sound physically hurt her. 6 months in, I confronted her. We were at her house while Danny worked late. Zara was napping upstairs, and Brenna sat at the kitchen table, staring at cold coffee. She looked up at me with eyes I didn't recognize. She whispered that she felt nothing, that Zara could disappear tomorrow and she'd feel relieved. Every time she looked at her, she felt sick, not guilty, sick, like her body was rejecting her. That night, I stayed over to help with the night feeding. Around 2 a.m., I heard Zara crying and went to check on her. Brenna was already there, standing over the crib with her fists clenched, her whole body shaking. The moment I picked up Zara, she quieted. I turned to see Brenna watching us with an expression that made my blood freeze. Pure hatred. Not at me, at the baby. 2 weeks later, I discovered why my sister couldn't love her daughter. It started when I noticed Brenna acting strange around our family photos. She'd remove any picture that showed her pregnant or holding Zara. When I offered to babysit, she'd agree immediately, too quickly, like she was desperate to escape. The breaking point came during Zara's first birthday party. In the kitchen during cake time, Brenna gripped the counter so hard her knuckles were white, gasping like she was going to vomit. Outside, she doubled over and asked if I remembered when Mom used to tell us stories about changelings, about fairies stealing human babies and leaving their own children behind. She said that night in the delivery room, something was wrong. The labor was too fast, too easy. She passed out for almost an hour, and when they handed the baby to her, it wasn't hers. I stared at my sister, brilliant, rational Brenna, who had a master's degree in chemistry. She grabbed my wrist and asked if I'd ever seen Zara cry real tears. She makes the sound, but no actual tears. She's never had a fever, never gotten sick, never had any normal baby problems. She doesn't actually sleep. She closes her eyes when she's supposed to, but she's always watching. Always listening. Last week, she found her standing in her crib at 8 months old, perfectly still, staring at the wall for hours. Every time she looked at that thing, she was reminded that her real daughter was gone, that she'd failed to protect her, that she was feeding and caring for the creature that replaced her. 2 weeks later, I discovered why my sister couldn't love her daughter. It started when I noticed Brenna acting strange around our family photos. She'd remove any picture that showed her pregnant or holding Zara, claiming they made the walls look cluttered. When I offered to babysit so she could have a girls' night, she'd agree immediately. Too quickly, like she was desperate to escape. The breaking point came during Zara's first birthday party. Brenna had gone all out with decorations, hired a photographer, invited everyone we knew. She looked perfect in her coral dress, smiling for pictures and thanking guests for their gifts. But I caught her in the kitchen during cake time, gripping the counter so hard her knuckles were white. She doubled over like she was going to vomit. Outside, she stared at the house where we could hear everyone singing happy birthday to her daughter. She asked if I remembered when we were kids and Mom used to tell us stories about changelings. The fairy tale thing about fairies stealing human babies and leaving their own children behind. I frowned. What if it wasn't a story? A chill ran down my spine as she explained that night in the delivery room. Something was wrong. The labor was too fast, too easy. She passed out for almost an hour. They said it was blood loss. But what if something else happened during that time? When they handed the baby to her, it wasn't hers. I stared at my sister, brilliant, rational Brenna, who had a master's degree in chemistry and could solve complex equations in her head. She said changelings mimic their host families. That's how they survive undetected. She grabbed my wrist and asked if I'd ever seen Zara cry real tears. She makes the sound, but look closely next time. No actual tears. She's never had a fever, never gotten sick, never had diaper rash or colic or any normal baby problems. She doesn't sleep. She closes her eyes when she's supposed to, but she's always watching, always listening. Last week, she found her standing in her crib. She's 8 months old. Babies can't stand unassisted at 8 months. She was standing perfectly still, staring at the wall, for hours. When she went to check on her, she was in the exact same position, like a statue. My heart was pounding. Part of me wanted to dismiss it as mental illness, but there was something in her voice. Not hysteria, but cold certainty. She pulled something from her purse. A small leather journal filled with meticulous notes written in her careful handwriting. Day 47. Seed stood in crib for 3 hours without moving. Eyes open entire time. Day 52. Pediatrician commented on unusual muscle development. Z can support full body weight. Day 63. Z stopped crying when Danny left for work. Immediately resumed when he returned. Knows our schedules. Day 71. Found Z staring at baby monitor camera. When I moved the camera, her eyes followed it. Day 85. Z ate solid food without gagging or spitting up. No learning curve. Page after page of observations that, individually, might be explained away. But together, they painted a disturbing picture. She flipped to the back of the journal where she'd taped dozens of pictures. Baby photos from the past 8 months. arranged chronologically. In every single photo, Zara was looking directly at the camera, not the unfocused gaze of a typical baby, but sharp, deliberate eye contact, like she was posing. I flipped through more photos. Birthday party pictures from that afternoon showed Zara sitting perfectly still while chaos erupted around her. Other children were crying, laughing, moving, but Zara remained motionless, watching everything with those unblinking eyes. Brenna led me to her car and opened the trunk. Inside was a box filled with research materials, printouts from academic papers, folklore books, even some theological texts. She'd been researching for months. Changeling legends exist in every culture. Irish, German, Scandinavian, Japanese. They all have stories about fairy children replacing human babies. She pulled out a thick folder with medical case studies from the 1800s. Doctors documented children with unusual development patterns, unexplained behaviors, physical anomalies that couldn't be explained by known conditions. Most of these children died young under mysterious circumstances. The few who survived into adulthood were institutionalized or abandoned by their families. I asked what exactly she was planning to do. Brenna's expression hardened. She was going to get her real daughter back. According to the folklore, changeling exchanges can be reversed if you perform the ritual correctly. Different cultures have different methods, but they all involve proving that the changeling isn't human. Some use iron. Changelings supposedly can't tolerate iron against their skin. Others recommend exposing them to running water or fire. I grabbed her shoulders. She was talking about hurting an innocent baby. Her baby. She said it wasn't her baby. I told her if she hurt Zara, I would call the police. We stared at each other in the fading daylight. I could hear laughter and music drifting from the house where Zara's birthday party continued without us. I made her promise she wouldn't hurt Zara. She said she couldn't promise that. I said I was taking Zara with me that night. She said if I took her away, she'd never get her real daughter back. There is no real daughter, I insisted. Zara is your daughter. She asked what if I was wrong. The question stopped me cold, because despite everything rational I believed, there was a tiny voice in my head asking the same thing. We went back inside. The party was winding down, guests starting to leave. Danny was cleaning up wrapping paper, while Zara sat in her high chair, perfectly still, watching the activity around her. I studied her more carefully than I ever had before. She was beautiful. Dark curls, bright blue eyes, porcelain skin. But now that I was really looking, there was something off. Not physically, but in her manner. She observed everything with an intensity that seemed beyond her age. When our cousin's 2-year-old ran past shrieking with delight, Zara didn't startle or turn her head. She just continued watching the adults with that same steady gaze. I approached her high chair and asked if she could wave bye-bye. She lifted her hand and moved it in a perfect waving motion. No learning, no fumbling, just immediate, precise mimicry. Most 8-month-olds would clap randomly or wave their whole arm. This was too controlled, too deliberate. That night, I offered to babysit while Brenna and Danny went to dinner. They needed time to talk, and I needed time to observe Zara, without Brenna's theories influencing my perception. After they left, I sat in the living room with Zara on a blanket surrounded by toys. She picked up each toy methodically, examined it thoroughly, then set it aside. No banging, no mouthing, no typical baby exploration, just systematic inspection. At bedtime, I carried her upstairs and placed her in the crib. She lay down immediately, closed her eyes, and remained perfectly still. I waited outside her door for an hour, then crept back in to check on her. Her eyes were open, staring at the ceiling. I whispered her name. She didn't move or acknowledge me in any way. I reached out to touch her forehead, and the moment my finger made contact with her skin, her eyes snapped to mine with laser focus. I jerked my hand back. She continued staring at me for several long seconds, then slowly closed her eyes again. My heart was racing as I backed out of the room. Downstairs, I called my friend Jessica, a pediatric nurse. I asked hypothetically what it would mean if a baby could maintain perfect eye contact from birth. She said that would be unusual. Most babies don't develop sustained eye contact until around 2 to 3 months. Standing unassisted at 8 months was possible, but early. She'd been worried about Brenna since the baby shower. She seemed disconnected. She talked about the baby like it was an abstract concept rather than her child. And she kept asking weird questions about newborn development timelines. When babies start recognizing faces, when they begin showing preferences, whether it was normal for them to seem too easy to care for. She said the baby never cried without reason, never fought diaper changes, never resisted feeding. She seemed bothered by how compliant Zara was. Easy is one thing, Jessica explained, but babies are supposed to be a little difficult sometimes. They're learning how to be human. They cry for no reason, they fight sleep, they go through phases of being fussy or clingy. It's all part of normal development. If they don't do those things, then something might be wrong. Either medically or some developmental disorders can present as unusually perfect behavior in infants. After we hung up, I sat in Brenna's kitchen trying to make sense of everything. Was my sister having a psychological breakdown, or was there something genuinely unusual about Zara? I decided to do my own research. 3 hours later, I was deep in medical journals and developmental psychology papers. What I found disturbed me more than Brenna's folklore research. There were documented cases of infants with unusual development patterns. Children who displayed advanced motor skills but delayed emotional development, who could mimic complex behaviors without understanding their meaning, who seemed to observe rather than experience their environment. Most were eventually diagnosed with various neurological conditions or autism spectrum disorders, but some cases remained unexplained, filed away as medical curiosities. I was about to close my laptop when I found something that made me freeze. A research paper from 2018 titled Anomalous Infant Development: When Advanced Physical Capabilities Mask Underlying Neurological Atypicalities. The paper documented 12 cases of infants who displayed preternatural development in motor skills, pattern recognition, and behavioral mimicry, but showed significant deficits in emotional bonding, pain response, and social reciprocity. The researchers had followed these children for 10 years. 8 had been diagnosed with severe autism spectrum disorders. 2 had been institutionalized for aggressive behaviors that emerged in toddlerhood, and 2 had disappeared under mysterious circumstances, their families claiming the children had never been the same and that they feared for their safety. I was reading the case studies when I heard a sound from upstairs. Not crying, not babbling, humming. I crept up the stairs and paused outside Zara's room. The humming continued, a complex melody that no 8-month-old should be able to produce. I pushed the door open slowly. Zara was sitting up in her crib, back straight, eyes open, humming a tune I didn't recognize. When she saw me, she stopped immediately and lay down, closing her eyes as if she'd been asleep the entire time. But I had seen her, and she had seen me seeing her. When Brenna and Danny returned from dinner, I was waiting in the living room with my laptop and a stack of printouts. Danny looked exhausted. I showed them everything: the medical papers, the case studies, my observations from that evening. Danny said this didn't prove anything supernatural, but his voice lacked conviction. I agreed, but it proved that something was wrong. Brenna sat quietly during my presentation, and when I finished, she looked at Danny with an expression that was part vindication, part desperation. Medical conditions aren't the same as what you're suggesting, Danny said, struggling with the words. Brenna asked what if they are. What if the folklore was describing real neurological conditions that people didn't understand? I said carefully. Or what if the neurological conditions are describing something else entirely? We sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Danny asked what we were suggesting we do. I thought we needed to contact the researchers who wrote this paper. Danny asked what if they can't help. Brenna and I exchanged a look. Then we consider other options, she said quietly. What other options? There are people who specialize in unusual cases like this. What kind of people? The kind most doctors won't refer you to. 2 days later, we were sitting in the office of Dr. Elena Vasquez, a child psychologist who also held degrees in anthropology and folklore studies. She was one of 3 specialists in the country who studied cases that fell between psychology, medicine, and what she diplomatically called cultural phenomena. Dr. Vasquez listened to our entire story without interruption, taking notes and asking clarifying questions. When we finished, she was quiet for a long time. She said she'd seen cases like this before. Brenna asked how many. In 15 years of practice, maybe 24. What happened to those children? It depends. Some responded well to specialized interventions. Others didn't. What kind of interventions? That depends on what we're actually dealing with. She'd like to observe Zara directly before making any recommendations. We scheduled a series of appointments. Over the next 2 weeks, Dr. Vasquez conducted extensive evaluations, developmental assessments, neurological tests, behavioral observations. The results were inconclusive. Zara displays several markers consistent with autism spectrum disorders, Dr. Vasquez explained during our follow-up meeting. But she also shows capabilities that fall well outside normal parameters. Her pattern recognition abilities are off the charts. Her motor control is at least 6 months ahead of schedule, and her mimicry skills are unlike anything she'd documented. But combined with her lack of emotional reciprocity and her unusual sleep patterns. What sleep patterns? Dr. Vasquez consulted her notes. According to the monitoring equipment, Zara appears to enter a state that mimics sleep, but shows none of the normal brainwave patterns associated with actual rest. My stomach dropped. What does that mean? It means she's not sleeping. She's doing something else. What kind of something else? I don't know. But I'd like to try a few specialized tests. What kind of tests? Dr. Vasquez hesitated. Some of my methods are unconventional. How unconventional? I'd prefer to explain after I've had a chance to research Zara's specific presentation more thoroughly. We left that meeting with more questions than answers. But for the first time, Brenna seemed hopeful. Someone finally believes us, she said as we drove home. She didn't say she believed us. She said she'd seen similar cases. Same thing. But I wasn't sure it was the same thing at all. That night, I stayed over again to help with Zara's nighttime routine. As I was giving her a bath, I noticed something I'd never seen before. A small mark on her back just below her left shoulder blade. It looked like a birthmark, but it was perfectly symmetrical. Too precise to be natural. I called Brenna. She appeared in the doorway and immediately saw what I was looking at. She said that wasn't there before. Are you sure? She'd changed Zara's diaper and clothes every day for 8 months. She would have noticed. We stared at the mark. A perfect spiral about the size of a quarter. Maybe it's just become more visible as she's gotten older. Birthmarks don't appear out of nowhere. As we watched, the mark seemed to darken slightly, the spiral pattern becoming more defined. Brenna whispered, "Did you see that?" "See what?" "It moved." I looked closer, but the mark appeared completely static. "Brenna, it's just a birthmark." But even as I said it, I wasn't convinced. The next morning, I called Dr. Vasquez and described what we'd seen. She'd like to move up our next appointment. How soon? Today, if possible. That afternoon, we were back in her office. Dr. Vasquez examined the mark on Zara's back with a magnifying glass and took several photographs. "Has anything else changed?" she asked. Brenna admitted Zara had been watching us differently, like she understands what we're saying about her. "Yesterday, I could swear she said mama," I said. But when I told Brenna, Zara wouldn't repeat it. That's not unusual for babies this age. But the way she said it, it was too clear, too purposeful. Dr. Vasquez was quiet for several minutes, studying her notes and the photographs of Zara's mark. "I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to trust me," she finally said. "I want you to leave Zara with me overnight." Brenna's voice was sharp. "What?" "For observation. There are some tests I can only conduct when the child is isolated from family members." "What kind of tests?" "The kind that will give us definitive answers about what we're dealing with." Brenna and I exchanged worried looks. "Is it safe?" I asked. "Safer than continuing without knowing the truth." "What if she's right?" Brenna whispered. "What if Zara really isn't? Then we'll deal with it," Dr. Vasquez said firmly. "But we need to know for certain." That night, Brenna and Danny stayed at my apartment while Dr. Vasquez observed Zara in her clinic. None of us slept. At 6 a.m., my phone rang. Dr. Vasquez said we needed to come in immediately. Her voice was shaking. We raced to the clinic to find Dr. Vasquez waiting for us in the parking lot. "Where's Zara?" Brenna demanded. "Safe, but we need to talk before you see her." "What happened?" Dr. Vasquez led us to her office and closed the door. "What I'm about to tell you will be difficult to accept. Just tell us." "Zara is not entirely human." The words hung in the air like a physical weight. "What do you mean?" Danny asked. "I mean she's something else. Something that resembles a human child but operates according to different biological and neurological principles." "That's impossible," I said. "I thought so too. But the evidence is undeniable." She showed us video footage from the night. Zara alone in the observation room, moving in ways that defied normal infant development. At one point, she stood up in the crib and walked to the window. Perfect balance, no hesitation. But the most disturbing footage showed her at 3 a.m., sitting motionless in the center of the room, staring directly at the camera for over an hour without blinking. "Children her age don't have that kind of sustained attention, Dr. Vasquez explained. "And look at this." She fast-forwarded to 4 a.m. The mark on Zara's back was glowing, actually emitting a faint light that was visible on the infrared camera. The mark appears to be some kind of identifier, or communication device. "Communication with what?" Brenna asked. "I don't know, but around 5 a.m. Zara began responding to something. Look." In the footage, Zara suddenly stood up and walked to the corner of the room. She appeared to be listening to something, occasionally nodding or shaking her head. "There was no sound on our equipment," Dr. Vasquez said, "but she was clearly interacting with something we couldn't detect." "What are you saying?" Danny's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm saying your sister was right. Zara is what folklore would call a changeling, but the reality is more complex than the old stories suggest." "What reality?" "Changelings aren't magical creatures. They're a different species, one that has been living alongside humans for thousands of years, occasionally substituting their offspring for ours." "Why?" "Near as I can determine, for study purposes. They're learning about us by raising human children while having their own raised by humans." "So, where's our real daughter?" Brenna asked. "Based on my research, probably safe. The species appears to care for human children better than many human parents do. How do we get her back?" "That's complicated." Dr. Vasquez explained that in her previous cases, there were two outcomes: families who learned to accept and love their changeling children, and families who managed to negotiate an exchange. "What kind of exchange?" "The species is intelligent and reasonable. If you can prove that you genuinely want your biological child back, and that you'll care for their child as well, they sometimes agree to a switch." "How?" "You have to make contact." That evening, we followed Dr. Vasquez's instructions. We placed Zara in her crib and waited in the next room with specialized recording equipment. At exactly 11:47 p.m., the mark on Zara's back began to glow. And then we heard it. A sound like wind chimes mixed with whispers, coming from Zara's room. Dr. Vasquez nodded. "They're here." What happened next changed everything we thought we knew about reality. 3 figures materialized in Zara's room, tall, ethereal beings that looked almost human, but moved with an otherworldly grace. One of them was holding a baby that looked exactly like what Zara should have looked like. Brenna breathed, "That's her. That's my daughter." Through Dr. Vasquez, we negotiated. The beings explained that they had been observing human families for generations, trying to understand our capacity for love and sacrifice. Most parents never realized the switch had been made, but occasionally someone would notice, and that presented an opportunity for dialogue. They offered us a choice: keep Zara and love her as our own, or trade her back for our biological daughter. "What happens to Zara if we choose the trade?" I asked. "She returns to her people and is raised with love and care. And if we keep her, you'll never see your biological daughter again, but you'll have the chance to raise a child who will become something extraordinary." Brenna looked at Danny, then at me, then at Zara, who was watching the entire exchange with those intelligent eyes. "I want my real daughter," Brenna said finally. The beings nodded and approached Zara's crib, but as they reached for her, something unexpected happened. Zara spoke, not baby babble or simple words, but complete sentences in a voice that was definitely hers, but carried an impossible weight of understanding. "Mama," she said, looking directly at Brenna, "I love you too." Brenna collapsed, because in that moment she realized the truth that Dr. Vasquez had been trying to prepare her for. It didn't matter what Zara was or where she came from. For 8 months, this child had been hers, had depended on her, lived with her, been shaped by her care, even if that care had been reluctant. And despite everything, despite the fear and the confusion and the research and the folklore, Brenna loved her. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't give her up." The beings waited patiently while our family fell apart, and and rebuilt itself in the space of 5 minutes. What if we keep both? Danny said slowly. That's not possible, Dr. Vasquez translated. Then I choose Zara, Brenna said firmly. She's my daughter. Not because of biology, but because she's mine. The beings nodded and began to fade, taking our biological daughter with them. Wait, I called out. Will we ever see her again? Perhaps, came the translated response. When she's old enough to choose for herself. And then they were gone. We stood in the sudden silence, looking at Zara, who smiled at us for the first time since she'd been born. A real smile, full of love and mischief and perfect, impossible humanity. 3 years later, Zara is everything the beings promised she would be. She's brilliant, kind, and occasionally displays abilities that amaze and terrify us. She can sense emotions, predict weather patterns, and once saved a neighbor's cat by somehow knowing it was trapped in a basement 3 blocks away. She calls Brenna Mama and Danny Daddy and me Aunt Nora. She loves picture books and strawberry ice cream and dancing to music only she can hear. And sometimes, late at night, I catch her staring out her bedroom window with that same intense focus she's always had. What are you looking for? I asked her once. My sister, she said simply. What sister? The one who looks like me. She's coming back someday. How do you know? Because she wants to meet the family that loved me enough to keep me. Brenna and I exchanged looks over Zara's head. Are you okay with that? Brenna asked. Zara nodded solemnly. She's my sister, and you're my mama. There's room for both. That night, I called Dr. Vasquez and told her what Zara had said. It's possible, she confirmed. In some cases, when the human children reach adulthood, they're allowed to make contact with their biological families. What should we expect? The unexpected. These children are raised with abilities and knowledge that we can barely comprehend, but they're also raised with human emotions and attachments. Your biological daughter may be more like Zara than you think. 6 months later, I was babysitting Zara while Brenna and Danny attended marriage counseling. They'd been working through the trauma of everything that had happened, learning to be a family under circumstances that no parenting book had prepared them for. Zara was playing in the backyard when she suddenly stopped and tilted her head, like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. She's here, Zara announced. Who's here, sweetheart? My sister. I looked around the empty yard. I don't see anyone. She's coming. 5 minutes later, a teenage girl walked around the corner of the house. She looked about 16, with Brenna's dark hair and Danny's green eyes, but there was something otherworldly about the way she moved, like Zara, but more pronounced. Hello, she said, her voice carrying that same impossible weight of understanding that Zara's sometimes did. I'm Luna. I believe you're my biological family. I stared at her, my phone halfway to my ear to call Brenna. You're the baby they took 16 years ago, she finished, though time moves differently where I was raised. I've been waiting to meet you. Zara ran to Luna and hugged her legs. Luna smiled, the same smile Zara had given us that night 3 years ago. Hello, little sister, Luna said, stroking Zara's hair. You've grown beautiful. I missed you, Zara said simply. I missed you too. I managed to call Brenna and Danny, who raced home to find both girls sitting on the back porch, talking in low voices like old friends reuniting after a long separation. Luna? Brenna whispered. Luna stood and studied Brenna's face with the same intense focus that Zara used. You're my birth mother, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes, you chose Zara over me. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Brenna's face crumpled. I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to— Don't apologize, Luna interrupted. You made the right choice. What? Zara needed you more than I did. She was struggling to understand human emotions, human connections. I was raised with love and knowledge and understanding of what I was from the beginning. Luna sat back down and patted the space beside her. Brenna sat carefully, like she was approaching a wild animal. I'm not here to reclaim anything. I'm here because Zara asked me to come. Asked you? We've been in contact since she learned to communicate properly. She wanted to meet her biological family, and she wanted you to meet your biological daughter. How long can you stay? Danny asked. As long as you'd like me to. I'm old enough now to choose where I live and with whom. Would you want to stay? Luna looked at Zara, who nodded encouragingly. I'd like to try, but you should know that I'm not entirely human either. The family that raised me, changed me, enhanced me. I'm something in between what Zara is and what you are. What does that mean? It means I can do things that might frighten you, but it also means I can help Zara learn to control her abilities. That evening, after Luna had been given Zara's old nursery and the girls had been put to bed, Brenna, Danny, and I sat in the living room trying to process what had happened. Is this real? Brenna asked. As real as anything else in our lives has been for the past 3 years, I replied. What if we can't handle 2 enhanced children? What if we can? Danny countered. What if this is exactly what our family is supposed to be? The next few months were an adjustment period unlike anything we could have imagined. Luna enrolled in the local high school, where she excelled academically but struggled socially. Her abilities made it difficult for her to relate to typical teenagers, and their problems seemed trivial compared to what she'd experienced. But at home, she flourished. She helped Zara understand and control her emerging abilities. She taught us about the species that had raised her, beings of incredible intelligence and compassion who viewed humans not as inferior, but as younger siblings in need of guidance. They're not trying to replace humanity, Luna explained one evening as we watched Zara make flowers bloom out of season in our garden. They're trying to help us evolve into what we're capable of becoming. Humans have enormous potential, but you're limited by fear and competition and short-sightedness. Children like Zara and me represent a bridge between what you are and what you could be. Is that why they do the exchanges? Partly, but mostly they do it because they love children, all children, and they believe that love transcends species. Do you love us? Brenna asked quietly. Luna was quiet for a long moment, watching Zara coax a butterfly to land on her finger. I love Zara, she said finally, and I'm grateful to you for raising her with so much care despite your fears. Whether that grows into the kind of love you have with her, I suppose we'll find out. 2 years later, Luna graduated as valedictorian and earned a full scholarship to MIT, where she planned to study theoretical physics and biology. But she deferred for a year to stay home with Zara, who was entering kindergarten and struggling with the overwhelming input of being around so many other children. She needs time to learn to filter, Luna explained. Right now, she's absorbing every emotion and thought from everyone around her. It's like trying to drink from a fire hose. Together, they developed techniques to help Zara manage her abilities in social situations. Luna taught her to create mental barriers, to focus on one person at a time, to find quiet spaces when the input became too much. By Christmas, Zara was thriving in school. Her teacher commented on her unusual empathy and her ability to help other children when they were upset or struggling. She has a gift for knowing exactly what someone needs. Yesterday, she convinced a shy boy to join a group activity, helped a girl who was crying about her parents' divorce, and somehow knew that another student was coming down with the flu before he showed any symptoms. Is that normal? Brenna asked. Normal? No. But wonderful? Absolutely. She's going to make a remarkable difference in the world. That night, as I tucked Zara into bed, she looked up at me with those impossibly knowing eyes. Aunt Nora? Yes, sweetheart? Are you happy that Mama kept me instead of trading me back? The question caught me off guard. Of course I am. Why would you ask that? Because sometimes people seem scared of me, and scared of Luna. I sat on the edge of her bed and smoothed her dark curls. Do you know what courage is? She nodded. Being brave when you're scared. That's right. And do you know what love is? Taking care of someone even when it's hard. Exactly. Your mama and daddy and I were scared when we first realized you were different, but we loved you more than we were scared. And that love made us brave enough to keep you and learn how to be the family. Even though I'm not human, you're human where it counts, I said, placing my hand over her heart. In here, the rest is just extra. She smiled and closed her eyes. I love you too, Aunt Nora. I love you, little one. As I turned off the light, I heard her whisper, thank you for helping Mama choose me. In the hallway, I found Luna waiting for me. She worries about being a burden, Luna said quietly. She's not. I know. But she remembers how Brenna felt in the beginning, how you all struggled to accept what she was. Do you remember when you were that young? Everything. We remember everything from the moment we're born. It's part of what makes us different. Do you resent us for giving you up? Luna considered the question carefully. No. You gave me the chance to grow up understanding what I was and how to use my abilities safely. And you gave Zara the chance to experience human love and connection in a way that shaped her into someone extraordinary. What happens now? When you go to college and Zara gets older, now we live our lives. We use our abilities to help people. We serve as bridges between your species and mine, and we prove that love really can transcend biology. Will there be others? More children like you and Zara? There are already others. We're not as rare as you might think, but most families never realize what their children are. They just think they have unusually gifted or unusual kids. How many others? Thousands. All over the world. Growing up, learning, preparing to help humanity take its next evolutionary step. Toward what? Luna smiled. Toward becoming the best version of yourselves. More compassionate, more connected, more aware of your impact on each other and your environment. Will we live to see it? You're seeing it now. Every time Zara helps a classmate, every time I solve a problem that stumps my professors, every time a family like ours proves that love matters more than genetics, we're already changing the world. 5 years later, Luna finished her doctorate in bioengineering and began working on projects that bridged the gap between human medicine and the advanced healing techniques she'd learned from her adoptive family. Zara, now 10, was excelling in a gifted program where her abilities were seen as exceptional rather than alarming. And Brenna had become one of the leading advocates for families dealing with unusual children, though she was careful never to reveal the full truth of what that meant. The hardest part, she told the support group she'd started, is letting go of your expectations and learning to love the child you have, not the child you thought you were getting. How do you do that? Asked a mother whose son displayed telepathic abilities that had emerged when he turned 5. One day at a time. One moment of choosing love over fear. One decision at a time to trust that your child knows things you don't. And that's okay. What if they're dangerous? What if they're not? What if they're exactly what the world needs? After the meeting, Brenna found me in the parking lot. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd made the trade? She asked. Sometimes. Do you think we made the right choice? I thought about Zara's laugh, about Luna's brilliant mind working to solve problems that could help millions of people, about the family we'd become against all odds. I think we made the only choice we could live with, I said, and I think it made us all better people. Even though it destroyed our family as we knew it, it didn't destroy our family. It transformed it into something we never could have imagined. Brenna nodded, looking up at the stars that Zara and Luna sometimes stared at for hours, seeing patterns and connections that remained invisible to us. I used to think love was supposed to be easy, automatic, natural. And now I know that real love is a choice you make every day, even when, especially when, it challenges everything you thought you knew about yourself and the world. No regrets? She smiled. How can I regret the choice that gave me the most extraordinary daughters in the world? That night, I went home to my own apartment, but not before stopping by to check on the girls. I found them in Zara's room, Luna reading aloud from a book that seemed to shimmer and change as she read, while Zara listened with rapt attention. "What are you reading?" I asked. "Stories from home," Luna replied. "About families like ours and the children who bridge worlds. Are they true stories?" "The best stories always are." I kissed them both goodnight and headed home, thinking about bridges and choices and the kind of love that transforms fear into courage. In my car, I called my mother, who had finally been told the truth about her granddaughters the year before. "How did it go tonight?" she asked. "Good. Really good. Are you happy, Nora?" I thought about the question, really thought about it. Was I happy with a life that had been turned upside down by impossible circumstances? With a family that defied every conventional definition? With children who were more and less than human, and who carried responsibilities I could barely comprehend? "Yes," I said, and meant it completely. I'm happier than I ever imagined possible, even though nothing turned out the way any of us expected, especially because of that. Because sometimes the most beautiful stories are the ones that begin with everything falling apart, and end with love putting it back together in ways you never knew were possible. And sometimes, the greatest gift you can give someone is not the child you thought they wanted, but the child they needed to become who they were meant to be.